So on to today's topic of willingness is easy. It's like climbing Mount Everest is easy. So looking at willingness, not easy. A willingness which is really about changing. And what I've really found in my years of doing this work, including myself, is about how much willing human beings are to change. We would rather actually have, sometimes I believe, our molars pulled out without any Novocaine whatsoever, and then have our left arm broken and our right ankle twisted really bad, and then starve for a week. We would much rather go through that than change. A willingness to change, to give up those things that we know aren't serving us, but we're so rooted into them that we're not going to give them up. Even though we've had people, loved ones, friends, family, our best friends, our wives, our husbands, our committed partnerships, telling us, hey, when you're doing that thing, it's not working for us. It's not fun to be around you. It's not very becoming of you. It doesn't make you attractive. You don't seem to be happy, whatever those things are. But we're so rooted in them, we'll stay in it, no matter what the circumstances is or how it's affecting us or those around us. Have you ever known somebody like that? Because I know no one here has ever done that. No, I know. The willingness to change. And this is what this wonderful program that we've embraced on this year, to be a vessel for transformation, which means complete change. We're looking at areas, and we've created this wonderful plan, this wonderful blueprint that if we were practicing or really looking at it and examining it and then applying it to our lives, we can create dramatic shifts in those areas that are not supporting us or those around us or our community the highest and best good, which is what we are about always on our spiritual path, is what areas that can we improve on, that if we improve on them, it makes us a stronger, more complete, whole human being, and by doing so, it makes us a lot more likable. It makes us a lot easier to be around. It makes it where others want to be in your company. So how many things are we hanging on to because we're unwilling to let go of them, and that by not allowing ourselves to let go of them, it doesn't make us likable or desirable or feel as if people just can't wait to hang out with you. That's what we're looking at. And so do we have any habits, behaviors, or addictions that when we are in the middle of them or practicing or exhibiting them, they do not make us appealing to others? That's what we're looking at. Are we willing to give any of those up? Or do we just like them because we've been doing them a long time? So we're going to look at, it's really easy to examine the obvious ones, but today we're going to look at some that we may have been practicing for a long time, and we're going to be surprised that, wow, we don't want to give those up. So as I've been saying since we started step number 4, and really it was with step number 3 of the 12-step program, that these are steps that 3, 4, 5, and 6 are not for the faint of heart, meaning it's much easier to know about them, but to practice them is really difficult. So I just want to remind us of the last 4 steps, including the one that we just embraced on last week. With step number 3, made a decision to turn our will, our personal, egotistical will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And as clear as I was on that one, I'd be willing to bet that we still have people amongst our community here that has never gone from A to Z in that moral inventory search. And we're carrying, and if we would just understand those burdens of by not doing that simple list, what they place upon your nervous system, on your immune system, on your heart, on your mind. If we would just understand that thoroughly, everyone that hasn't done that today, you couldn't wait to get home and make out your list. If you just fully understood how good it feels to make that list and then share it, which is what step 5 is about. One person. God, yourself, and one other. You're sharing as you're writing it. The awareness, you can't do anything ever in life that's not in the awareness of the universal consciousness of spirit. You've never operated one split of a Google of a second outside of the consciousness of God. So, and sharing it with one other person, trust. And then step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Where we've made mistakes in our life, and we've all made mistakes because we're human. It's okay to make a mistake. I can't even give a 2-minute talk up here without stuttering or stammering over a word sometimes. It's okay. I'm going to make mistakes. I know that I'm not going to live up to the expectations that many of you have based on historical cognizant memory of how you believe a minister should be. Many of you are still trying to categorize me in that old traditional thing. You're waiting for the cloak. And what I was telling somebody else is, what I've learned in all these years, since 1988 of being a practicing minister, is I'm not going to live up to a congregation's expectations of how they believe a minister should be. But the truth is, I'm actually living beyond my own expectations of myself. Truthfully, if you'd ever told me growing up, as the kid that I was growing into, the young adult, if you'd have told me somewhere in my early 20s that one day I was going to be a preacher, oh my God, I'd say, can we have a drink to that? Because it's just not going to happen. You're just not going to make macaroni out of pepperoni. You know, it's just not going to work that way. And so that willingness to shift, to change. Wow. A willingness to shift, to change. So as I'm talking today, I want you to be looking inwardly. See, I'm always trying to trigger thoughts inside of you when I'm standing up here. I want to get your mind, the wheels turning. You know, the wheels turning. We gave you coffee, that should help. And so get your wheels turning. Okay, what area could I make a shift or a change in? It doesn't have to be this dramatic night and day, but just something that I can do just a little bit better. As I shared last week from John Maxwell, is that, and I've been sharing it in our Tuesday night class, and every time I get a chance to share it, it's so important, is that for significant change to occur, for change, any kind of change to occur, you got to alter or shift or change your daily routine. See, if we think we have this intention, we want to change, great. Thanks. Good luck with it. But what's the action? So you see, we want to shift. Is there an area in our lives that we have a willingness that if we shift, it would make us just feel a little bit better? It would feel a little more happier. Our relationships would be a little bit better. The people we work with would be a little more happier with us. So where is it that we have a willingness to shift or change? And so that's what we're looking at here today as we embark on the spiritual principle of willingness. So the simple question is, are we willing to have God remove all of our character defects? Ooh. Ooh. You realize what that means? That if you walked out of here today with all of our character defects, you would be a combination of Jesus, assuming he lived, Buddha, Muhammad, Gandhi, Dr. King, and every other great leader we've ever thought. Immediately. That's what would happen if on their best days, I always want to throw it, because all them people had bad days. You understand, they didn't walk around in just this continuously state of heavenly bliss. They struggled too. Every one of them, every human being that's ever walked on earth has struggled at some point. It's okay. Are we willing to fight the struggle, or are we willing to go with the flow? Because we're about shifting and adjusting and changing and always altering and adapting. That we as human beings can do better than any other form of life on earth is adapt. Are we willing to shift, to adapt to whatever situation it needs to allow more of that spiritual essence of God to flow through us? Because that's not easy, because I like being me. I don't want to shift. I'm rutted there. This is how I go about willingness. This is if I was to physically express to you how many of us can be when it comes to willingness. I have no idea where it came from. It just seemed like the thing to do at the moment. So as we embark on this most important principle of willingness, which is difficult to master. to master willingness, surrender, letting go, going with the flow, which can play on the same playground as spontaneity. So here's where you know you may have a way to measure your willingness, the principle of willingness in your life. It's 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and you don't have any plans for that night, and you're home, and you got that fun entertainment thing going on, laundry. And that's going to be your night, folding your clothes. And a friend calls you up and says, hey, you want to go out for dinner and meet me in an hour? No, I'm busy. Not spontaneous. If that's your normal if that's your normal response when you're invited to be spontaneous, there's moments where you just can't go at the drop of a hat. I understand that. But in general, how are you when something isn't planned and you're invited to be a part of it? What's the general thought? Oh, I didn't know about it 6 weeks ahead. I didn't have it planned. I got to think through it. Let me see. Can I do it? Is it? No, stay home with your laundry. Live life to the fullest, baby. When you're standing, quite a few times, and I performed, it's kind of funny in my life, if I'd been keeping track, I performed just about the same amount of funerals as I have weddings. And sometimes I get them confused. Dearly beloved. We are gathered here to change to bless the two of you. Just kidding, God. Humor. Be spontaneous with me. Now, where the hell was I? In doing the funerals, I've never once had anybody say, when I'd say, give me the best characteristics, best qualities, best attributes of the person. They never said they did laundry really well. They passed on a lot of nights out with friends because they had chores. So spontaneity works right in hand with willingness. Willingness is ready to do something voluntarily without being forced. Are we willing to invite change in our lives, or does change only come when it is forced upon us? That is so important, because how many of us see change? We know that there's something not quite right in our life, but it's not like a big enough problem to give us our full attention. And so how I've always given as a great analogy to that is we're driving down the highway, and we're going, 60, 80, 100 kilometers an hour. And we see this little sign says, you need to get off the road. But it's not big enough. And we're focused on where we're going. My God, we're going. So we go on by, we ignore it. Down the road a ways, sign gets a little bigger. Need to get off the road. We're focused, we don't see it. But it's calling out to us to alter our course of direction. But we keep going a little faster because we know where we're going, because my God, we're doing it our way. And this is the road we've set on. And the sign's a lot bigger. Get off the road. Pretty soon, there's an overpass. Last chance. Get off the road. And then you're surprised when the road ends and you run off the road into the ditch or into the canyon. Because the road signs were all along the way, but because we weren't willing to what? To pay attention, to see the change that they were calling out to us to make. So we keep going our way because we think we know which way we always need to go, instead of being willing to listen to the intuitive essence of the universe that created this magnificent planet that we live in, and all the intricacies and the unbelievable ecosystem and the perfect balance that the nature has if we would just get the heck out of the way and let it do its thing. How perfectly awesome this planet is, that when it gives us signs, we don't want to heed to them. Willingness. When we're spiritually awakened and on, at that moment we see that little sign, off. Those are the little red flags that pop up in our life. How many of us are regretting not reading those little red flags? You get into a job a weekend, you go, uh-oh. Or maybe it's a relationship, or maybe it's something about your body. A little red flag shows up. Something's not quite working. It's all right, I'm going to just keep going. I'm going to just keep going. And we get rooted in that thought process of just keeping going. So I want to know, do we have a willingness to shift, to alter, to change? And what that takes is by practicing these fundamental truths of spiritual principles, which do include honesty, acceptance, hope, commitment, faith, courage, willingness, humility, unconditional love, perseverance, open-mindedness, awareness, vigilance, self-discipline, sharing and caring, as well as selfless service. When we're practicing these principles is when we are willing to shift, to grow, to become more of who we are. See, there's nothing wrong with right where we're at, and most of us are quite content with it. But we're looking at, can we improve a little, increase a little at a time? So what is our willingness to change? As we begin to see the fruits of growth in ourselves and others, we become hopeful in our ability to grow along the spiritual lines of the aforementioned principles. As it is said, we become inspired to embrace the virtues we aim for and admire. When you look at what you call spiritually enlightened people, very successful people, whatever it is that you admire, that you value, that you want to ascend to embrace more of, to become more like, when you see those qualities, what are we currently doing in our daily life to move ourselves more towards those? Do we need more education? Do we need to work on our emotional past? Do we need to practice more meditation? Do we need to get a mentor? What do we need to grow to aspire to what it is that we want to grow into? Regardless of our age, it never stops. Never. And if anything, as I've moved into that important age place of 50 years old, I've lived more years than I've lived more than I have left to live. Oh, I know, that's really nice. The nice thoughts. If I make it to 100, you wouldn't want to be around me because I'd be one of them crabby old men. Give me 90 and I'm happy. 90 or more, I'm happy. Okay? But what I'm seeing is, I don't have the luxury of waiting or procrastination. You understand, procrastination is just simply a 5-syllable word for laziness. True? Yeah. So what have we been procrastinating on? What have we been holding back from? Because once we acquire the willingness and the courage to adjust, we recognize the energy of God from within and the competence and potential that it takes to achieve the task of transformation. Transformation, shift, change is not an easy principle, is not an easy activity. We come to realize that positive thinking, including hope and faith, are the necessary requirements to accelerate our spiritual growth. But it's important to understand that spiritual growth is not something that just all of a sudden has this dramatic shift. To grow consistently is to become content with patient improvement. Are you better today than you were a year ago? Are you feeling better about yourself and about your life and about your everything that you have direct control over and responsible over than you did a year ago? Or do you feel you're below where you felt a year ago? Patient improvement. Patient. To be patient. See, what's important to understand is that it's really easy to look at the big aspects or bad behaviors or addictions that we're all not perhaps practicing and haven't had the experience of going through. But it's also on a smaller level, which is where more of us fit into these categories. So let me see if I speak to anyone. Because no one wants to be so proud that we are scorned as a braggart, nor so greedy that we are labeled a thief. No one wants to be angry enough to harm another person, lustful enough to cause pain in another being, gluttonous enough to ruin one's own health. No one wants to be agonized by the chronic pain of envy or to be paralyzed by being sloth. Of course, most human beings don't suffer these defects at these rock bottom levels. We who have escaped these extremes are apt to congratulate ourselves. And we think we've done really well. Yet can we? After all, has it possibly been in self-interest, pure and simple, that has enabled most of us to escape? Not much spiritual effort is actually involved in avoiding excess, which will bring us punishment anyway. But when we face up to the less violent and less extreme aspects of these very same defects, then where do we stand? Now listen to this. What we must recognize now is that we exult in some of our defects. We really love them. Who, for example, doesn't like to feel just a little superior to the next fellow, or even quite a lot superior? Isn't it true that we like to let greed masquerade as ambition? To think of liking lust seems impossible to most of us. But how many men and women speak love with their lips and believe what they say so that they can hide lust in a dark corner of their minds? And even while staying within conventional bounds, many people have to admit that their imaginary sex excursions are apt to be all dressed up as dreams of romance. Self-righteous anger can also be very enjoyable. In a perverse way, we can actually take satisfaction from the fact that many people annoy us, for it brings a comfortable feeling of superiority. Gossip barbed with our anger, a polite form of murder by character assassination, has its satisfactions for us too. Here we are trying to help those we criticize. We are trying to proclaim our own righteousness. When gluttony is less than ruinous, we have a milder word for that too. We call it taking our comfort food. We live in a world riddled with envy. To a greater or less degree, everybody is infected with it. From the defect, we must surely get a warped yet definite satisfaction. Else, why would we consume such great amount of time wishing for what we have not, rather than working for it or angrily looking for attributes we shall never have, instead of accepting the fact and accepting that we're okay the way we are? And how often we work hard with no better motive than to be secure and slothful later on. Only we call that retiring. Consider too our talents for procrastination, which is really laziness. Nearly anyone could submit a good list of such defects as these, and few of us would seriously think of giving them up, at least until they cause us excessive misery. Some people, of course, may conclude that they are indeed ready to have all such defects taken from them. But even these, if they construct a list of still milder defects, will be obliged to admit that they prefer to hang on to some of them. Therefore, it seems plain that few of us can quickly or easily become ready to aim at spiritual and moral perfection. We want to settle for only as much perfection as will get us by in life. Is that where we're at? Boy, have I found myself in that category. When things come easy to you, when you're a natural athlete, when it takes little effort to succeed in the classroom, when things just naturally come easy to you, you don't think you need to put out that full effort. We want to settle for only as much perfection as will get us by in life. According, of course, to our various and sundry ideas of what will get us by. So the true difference between the men and boys, the girls and the women, is the difference between striving for a self-determined objective and for the perfect objective, which of course is God. Many will ask at once, how can we accept the entire implication of step 6? Why, that is perfection. This sounds like a hard question, but practically speaking, it isn't. How many of us have done something thinking we were doing the right thing and it just didn't turn out quite right? See if this applies to anyone here. For once there was a little boy who lived in the country. And the family had to use an outhouse, and the little boy hated it because it was so hot in the summer, freezing cold in the winter, and it stunk all the time. The outhouse was sitting on the bank of a creek, and the boy was determined that one day he would push that old outhouse straight into the creek. One day after a spring rain, the creek was swollen, so the little boy decided today was the day to push the outhouse into the creek. He found a large stick and started pushing. Finally, that old outhouse toppled into the creek and floated away. That night, his dad told him they were going to the woodshed after supper. Knowing that meant a spanking, the little boy asked, "Why?" The dad replied, "Somebody pushed the outhouse into the creek today. It was you, wasn't it, son?" The boy proudly answered yes. Then he thought a moment and said, "Dad, I read in school today that George Washington chopped down a cherry tree and didn't get into trouble because he told the truth." To which the dad replied, "Well, son, George Washington's father wasn't in the cherry tree." So only in step 1 of the 12-step program, where we made the 100% admission that we were powerless over our addictions, behaviors, and habits, can be practiced with absolute perfection. The remaining 11 steps state perfect ideals that we're striving towards. They are goals towards which we look and the measuring sticks by which we estimate our progress. Seen in this light, step 6 is still difficult, but not at all impossible. The only urgent thing is that we make a beginning and have a willingness to keep trying. If we should gain any real advantage in the use of step 6 on problems other than alcohol, we shall need to make a brand new venture into open-mindedness. We shall need to raise our eyes towards perfection and be ready to walk in that direction. It will seldom matter how haltingly we walk. The only question will be, are we ready? Are we ready to shift? Are we willing to shift? Looking again at those defects we are still unwilling to give up, we ought to erase the hard and fast lines that we have drawn. Perhaps we shall be obliged in some cases still to say, "This I cannot give up yet." But we should not say to ourselves, "This I will never give up." Let's dispose of what appears to be a hazardous open end we have left. It is suggested that we ought to become entirely willing to aim towards perfection. We note that some delay, however, might be pardoned. That word in the mind of a rationalizing, struggling person with addictions could certainly be given a long-term meaning. We could say, "How very easy. Sure, I'll head to perfection, but I'm certainly not going to hurry anytime soon." Soon. We got plenty of time. Maybe I can postpone dealing with some of my problems indefinitely. So if you had to do that honest moral inventory and go in and look, how many problems have you been postponing? Basically indefinitely. How many of us have an issue from our childhood that we still have not looked directly at? We've been postponing it. When we've been postponing it, and we've been postponing it, and we've been postponing it. Not for years, but for decades. How many of those things? How many current issues have we been practicing for more than a year? But we'll get around to it. We'll do it. Those things are the things that we don't want to give up. What often speeds us up is a breakdown of the big three. And that's what causes many of us to change. Is when our health goes bad, when a relationship breaks up, or we have financial struggles. Or D, all the above. Then we become willing to change. Then we realize, oh, I should have taken those earlier signs and got off of this road because it was leading to a dead end. But we were going to see it through until it crashed. So where are we on our ability to practice this principle of willingness? Of course, such a bluffing of oneself will not have to go the way of many another pleasant rationalization. Have we ever bluffed ourselves? Hey, I'm going to work on that. This year's the year I'm going to get my body in shape. This is the year that I'm going to work on being more open and loving and intimate in my relationships. This is the year that I'm going to heal my family issues. This is the year that I'm going to repair my relationship with my children. This is the year. And we bluff ourselves. That's a bluff. We're just kidding. Because when we don't do it. How many of us are not doing it? And what I'm saying is the reason we want to do these things is because you feel better. Everything that I'm always trying to preach here or share with you is that by doing this, you're going to feel better. The results are going to be in your favor. You're going to feel better about yourself. The better that you feel about yourself, the better that you feel about me, the better that you feel about another person, the better you treat them, the better that you feel about yourself, the better that you ensure others treat you the same way, and on the list goes. The better you feel about yourself, the better you dress yourself, the better you take care of yourself financially, the better your relationships are, the better the space you live in, the better you are at being in relationship with the greater source, and the better that you feel about who and what you are in this world, because you know you are sourcing, drawing upon, pulling from within you that goodness that is just bubbling out of you. But we have stuffed it down from our unhealthy habits, behaviors, and addictions. And what we're about is, are we willing to grow into the majestic beings that we were destined to be when we were sent here to this planet to roam around here, or do we want to hold on to those gifts and decide that when it's a year from our death, or 6 months from our death, or the last month, or sometimes the last week, that now we're going to open up and be loving and intimate? Yeah. Because there's no other way. So where are we? Where are we in that shifting? Are we willing to grow into the unbelievable people that we are? Even more so than you are right now. I will keep saying, I don't want you to hear, I think you're messed up. Just some, not all. No. I want us to keep growing, because you see, as we grow in consciousness, then when we come together collectively, we continue to create a space for healings to occur. We've had great healings in the last 2.5 years since we've been together. I wish I could stand up here and give you details of what's taking place just in the last Free the Heart. What took place at the 5 days. Healings of issues that have harmed relationships, have harmed ourselves internally and emotionally for years. And they're being healed because of the collective consciousness. And what I know is that as we grow collectively as a community, it strengthens the foundation of spirit that we have here. And the stronger that spirit has, the stronger and quicker that we can heal any emotional struggles, any physical struggles. And we can repair our relationship with that higher power, because the better we feel about that higher power, the better we feel about ourselves, the better we feel about each other. It's a simple process. And that's what is new about this thought, is, are we willing to surrender to the simple process of being who we were naturally intended to be, which is an enlightened, awakened individual expressing God's love and light through all actions, behaviors, and words. And there's times where we're not going to do that 100%. I know that. I'm a living testimonial to that. And if you don't believe me, ask my wife. There are moments where I'm not all that. But when I am all that, do I feel all that? And that's how each of us is. You know when you've glimpsed the past, a part of your majesty. Whether it's come through in a wonderful prose, wonderful song, a story, a book, a painting. You know when you're in touch. When you've taken a picture and you look at it and you go, my God, I just captured God. You know when those moments are. What we're trying to do is extend those moments. Extend them so that they're expressed to those that are closest to us. So that the ones that we love the most, when we ask them, are they willing to grow and shift and grow into more of who they are, they say, yes. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So to end with, please affirm with me this affirmation. It's a very simple affirmation. I willingly follow my God-given intuition today. Say that with me. I willingly follow my God-given intuition today. And that if it tells me to get off the road early, I'm going to see the sign and get the heck off the road. So I want you to understand, if you've ever struggled with willingness and your willpower, you're normal. Giving up our willpower and our addiction to our ego is a difficult process. It's as difficult or more difficult than attempting to climb Mount Everest. Something that you may not know about me is I love Tibet. And I love, one of my bucket lists is to go to base camp at 15,000 feet and work and cook and that for the 30, 60 days that they're. And I've read probably 30 books on Mount Everest climbing. And if there's one thing that determines the difference between the mountaineers that make it and the ones that don't, it's the ones that let the mountain dictate to them on the process and when and how to climb, and the ones that say, I'm going to do it today because I paid my money to get here and I'm going to go no matter what. Those are the ones that die on the mountain. The ones that listen and are willing to go with the flow, and when the mountain says, you're not coming up me today, they don't try to force their will upon the mountain. They willingly surrender to what the mountain is telling them. I want us to focus on surrendering and being willing to look at what life is telling us on a daily basis. Let us pray. Turning within, and I love it when I say let us pray, because there is nothing better than praying with a collective community.